Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast brought to you by Tacticam. Tacticam is by far the easiest way to begin filming your hunts. Whether it's the 4K 5.0 or the budget-friendly solo, Tacticam has something for everyone. Check them out at tacticam.com. This year we're also working with Spartan Forge. Spartan Forge is machine learning for the deer woods. Basically, Spartan Forge takes collar deer studies, insurance car deer accident information, social media geolocations, and it couples that with weather, moon phase, and rut activity to tell you when or when not to be in the woods. This currently has an online interface at spartanforge.ai, but the app is currently being built and set to launch late summer. Once the app goes live, you can expect there to be a price increase, but if you use code BOWHUNTER, you can save 25%, and that will stick with you as long as you use the Spartan Forge services. So head on over to spartanforge.ai and get your free 14-day trial. Have you ever taken a shot at an animal and just completely blew it? Or have you been shooting at targets and all of a sudden you can't seem to get the pin on the target no matter what you do? How did you overcome this, or were you able to overcome it? That's what we're talking about on today's podcast. Today we're joined by shooting instructor Joel Turner to discuss overcoming target panic. This podcast came to be at the request of one of our Patreons. They asked, and we delivered. Patreon's like our newest member, Cody Campo, out of New Richmond, Wisconsin. If you aren't familiar with Patreon, Patreon is a crowdfunding for creators where listeners support the show with a monthly donation for as little as 17 cents a day. For 17 cents a day, you help keep the show going and progressing and help keep us getting better. And to give back to our Patreons, we have a Facebook page, Bowhunter Chronicles Opportunists, where we share ideas for the live podcast, the latest goings on, as well as links to the Vitals Live. Vitals Live is a live webinar series where you get to join live conversations with experts like Dan Infalt, John Eberhardt, Greg Litzinger, Garrett Prawl, Zach Fehrenbaugh, and we also do quarterly giveaways. This quarter, we're giving away through Tacticam a fisheye package. So if you haven't seen the Tacticam fisheyes, they're a wide-angle, waterproof, submersible Tacticam. They offer loop mode. They're wide-angle. They also work off of the same remote, so you don't have to just use your phone. So you can use the Tacticam remote, which will also work with your 4K 5.0. In addition to that, someone else is going to win one of Dan Infalt's B stands. So we ordered that with the donations that we get from Patreon, and we're going to be giving one of those away. We've got it ordered. As soon as they start shipping, we're going to be, as soon as we get that, we're going to ship it out to you. And we're also partnered with Basemap. So if you haven't checked out Basemap, Basemap offers an amazing GPS mapping application. It's one price for the entire country. That's less than the cost of one state for some of the other apps. It also has tons of layers, as well as lake charts, depths for many inland lakes. And you can use code Chronicles to save 20%. And that makes the app $2 a month for the year. So for $24, I mean, it is impossible to beat. We've been using it extensively for the last 2 years, and I don't see any way or any reason to switch back. The new screenshots that they've been sharing of that app and the things that are coming and the enhancements, it looks incredible. Super excited to see that. So Basemap's giving away a year subscription to that, as well as a swag pack with a shirt and a hat. Also in the intro, you heard that we're partnered with Spartan Forge. Spartan Forge is also offering up a year subscription to their service. And if you haven't seen the screenshots of their new app, check that out on their Instagram. And you can save 25% again by using code BOWHUNTER on that one. And that price will be locked in for the duration of the time, regardless of the price change. And you're going to want to jump on that because as soon as that app comes out, which is supposed to be next month, maybe June, July, that price is definitely going to go up, but you'll be locked in. And then Zinger fletchings, they're 3D printed compression fit fletchings. Those guys, great guys. They've offered up a set of theirs. So basically, you'll just tell them what arrows you have, the outside diameter, and they'll make them for you. And they make a 4-fletch, 3-fletch, different degrees of helical. Pretty sweet. Lots of our Patreons are shooting them. I'm setting up my set of arrows right now. And I just set up my new Carbon Zion bow, which we just so happen to be giving away, and that's outside of Patreon. So you can win that not being a Patreon. If you want to check out the Patreon stuff, you can go to patreon.com/Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. You can go to bowhunterchroniclespodcast.com and sign up there, or you can just click the link in our Instagram. And so when you're checking out the Patreon stuff, there's a link for the 2021 Carbon Zion that we're giving away. And that bow, sweet shooting bow, like I said, I just got mine set up, and that is coming with a HHA Tetra sight as well as a rest. So that's going to be complete, ready to go right out of the box. And we're giving that away. You can go to that link on Instagram, link on the webpage. All that stuff, but that's just to give back, to say that we appreciate everybody that's listening. This podcast is one that you're going to want to tell your buddies about, your buddy that sucks at shooting. Maybe you don't want to tell him about it. Maybe he's going to outshoot you. But this podcast has really helped both John and I. And when we got done recording this, I mean, this has been one of the best ones that we've done. So I know you guys are going to like this one. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. Tonight we are talking with Joel Turner, Shot IQ, Target Panic Guru, I think we can call him. How are you doing tonight, Joel?
I'm excellent, man. Just about to shoot a league night here, so it's going to be good.
Awesome. Our leagues have been shut down. And
oh, jeez.
Yeah, we live in Michigan, so our governor says no fun for anybody. But so for the listeners who don't know you, let's hear a little bit about why did I call you the Target Panic archery mindset guru guy?
Well, it might be because I've been through every gamut of target panic known to mankind, as most of us have. But I, started shooting a bow when I was 7. And by the time I was 8, no instruction or anything like that. I mean, this is back in the early 80s, and just having fun as a young man, slinging arrows, but wondering why I was always locked off the target. I could never actually aim at the target without letting it go. In those early days, I always shot recurves and longbows and such. And then when I put a sight on a compound bow, I could never get the pin on the target without letting it go. Of course, I was shooting with my fingers back then, but it was just a thing that just kept on going through my teenage years into my 20s, and trying to figure this stuff out. And bow hunting was my life, but I just wasn't good at it. I was good at certain aspects of it, but not at the shooting part. And then I became a law enforcement officer when I was 24. And that's when the determination level started to come up, because I didn't have the option of missing anymore. And so I really had to figure out, because the whole target panic thing, whatever you want to call it, shot anticipation, was very prevalent in my firearms work as well. And I shot a lot, but I was really good at air rifles and 22 long rifle. But you put a centerfire rifle in my hand, I was worthless. I mean, just yanking the trigger all the time. And it was the same science that was happening to me in the firearms world as in the archery world. So, but when I became a police officer, things had to change. And that's when I started try to figure out what's really happening here, right? And that, back in those early days, in my early 20s, I didn't really have a clue what was happening. I did have some success, however. When I was in the academy, I took top firearms in my class, because I had tried to fix a mental problem with mechanical means. And by that, I mean, I started shooting a 1911 pistol instead of a Glock that had a lot longer trigger. The 1911 had a lot shorter trigger stroke in it. And for some reason, I could shoot it better. I could control it better, not knowing why or how, but just the fact that it was working out, right? And then still horrible. I was starting to become kind of a backyard hero with my bow, but you put me in front of a bunch of people, worthless. You put me in front of a critter, worthless. So I mean, it took me. I started bow hunting elk when I was 14 years old, and it took me 13 years to kill a bull elk with my bow.
That's not very good odds for us guys coming from the east out
Well,
west looking
it
for
is,
elk.
yeah, but it is no, but it is now because the code's been cracked now. So, I mean, I'm a two-time world elk calling champion, so I can call elk in like a chicken on a string. However, I couldn't hit them. I could not control myself at the moment of truth, and so that was really starting to work on me. And then that basically set me on the path of research that became control process shooting and shot IQ and all the stuff that is in existence now.
Okay. So take us through that process if you would, because like I had never experienced target panic until last year. We did not do the total archery challenge because it bumped up against our travels for elk season. But the year previous to that, I shot like the first 2 days fairly decent. I shot within my normal ability. And on the last day, on the shortest course, something happened and I could not hold on the target. I could not even get near the animal. And then I'm trying to drive by. And my body was frozen and locked. And there wasn't a catalyst. There wasn't like an event that was like, oh, this happened, and then it was just
No,
all of a sudden a flip switched.
you you had you had practiced your own failure your whole archery career, and it just came to fruition at that time. And it may sound weird, but I imagine in your archery that you maybe punched the trigger some days you didn't, but there was always a little bit of trigger punch in there.
Oh yeah, he always had some trigger punch.
Right. So if you always have a little bit of trigger punch, every single shot you are practicing your own failure. And you get more and more and more efficient. That's all you did is you started to use your sight picture as the stimulus for your shot, and you punch the trigger, and then you couldn't even get your pin on there, and you punch the trigger, and then you jump the target, and then you try to drop the target, and then you'd come in from the sides. And it's the same thing that happens to every single human being that follows the natural path of learning, which we're all going to do. And that's why shooting is so different, right? Shooting is you have to actually stay in the cognitive stage of learning and not go to the automatic stage. That's what makes shooting so different from everything else.
I feel like you were behind us on that course because I tried all of those things, I feel like.
Sure. We all do, right? So, but literally, and I can't stress this enough, when people go out and practice, and if they punch the trigger the tiniest bit, even the tiniest bit, they're practicing their own failure for high stress events. So we have to stop doing that. You have to go out and use shooting to practice concentration. Use shooting to make decisions, right? Practice making decisions and practice the determination that's required to make those decisions. Otherwise, you're practicing your own failure. There's really nowhere the other way to put that, right? I mean, and sure, people are going to have some amounts of success, but you never know when you're going to fail. And usually it's on the buck of a lifetime, right? Or a bull of a lifetime. And things just become ultra efficient, and you screw it up, and you wondered what the hell happened, and you blacked out and all that stuff. Well, all you did is become ultra efficient.
Yeah, that was me last year in Montana.
So, like, did you not get your pin on a bull or a buck that you wanted, or what was the deal?
So I've dealt with the target panic thing, and it was like, I mean, going way back, like I shot great. Like I shot just the wrist strap, and I didn't punch the trigger. And we started shooting our leagues and stuff, and I actually I took like first place in our leagues the one year, and then I went and I started watching Dudley's videos and all that, and I ended up, I'm like, I'm gonna get a thumb trigger, I'm gonna try one of these, and it was like I gave myself target panic. I'm like, I read about it and everything, and it was like, I swear I just gave it to myself. Like You know, it was
You
like,
didn't give it to yourself. You were born with it, bro.
right.
Every one of us is born with it. It's just when you went to the thumb trigger, a thumb trigger is the most complex of all of the trigger movements. And you wouldn't think so because all you do is move your thumb, right? Well, you're not supposed to move your thumb
Right.
at all, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes fairly complex with it. So that's the deal. You're supposed to reach up on that thumb trigger and then stretch the back of your hand, which articulates your thumb into it. But if you don't know that, you're just going to start punching that thing the littlest bit, and then that gets, and your mind loves you for it, and it just gets more and more and more efficient.
Right. And so what I did was I ended up so I bought a silverback, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
a back tension. And
Tension activated release. Yeah.
and so that, I mean, if the first, you know, I sent some through the freaking ceiling, and, you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
once I got used to shooting that was, I actually told Adam, like, don't go buy a thumb trigger, just
Mm-hmm.
get a back tension or a tension release,
Mm-hmm.
and because that's going to be a way to, you know, you can't punch it. I mean, you can jerk it, but once
Yeah.
you start getting, but then you just think, you know, think about it, just pull through. But
Mm-hmm.
so last year when I went out elk hunting, I got a new bow,
Mm-hmm.
and like with the way COVID was and everything, like, it took forever to get my 70-pound limbs in. I actually
Mm-hmm.
built the bow the week before I went out.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I built this brand new set of arrows and tried getting it tuned. And I build my own strings, everything. I like tune the shit out of my bows.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I had everything good. I got out there the first day. I ended up going after some antelope,
Mm-hmm.
and had an antelope. It was a frontal shot at 35, which is a long shot. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on my knees, and I ended up taking the shot, and my arrow did like this big old corkscrew. And I was like, what the hell? So
Yeah.
I got to my buddy's place in Bozeman, and he has a bow press and all that. And I end up, well, for one, my nocks, like my D loop, like squeezed my center serving, so I was getting a ton of knock.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'd go to pull my arrow off, and the knock was stuck on the string basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have the materials to reserve it. So I ended up going to like the nocturnals. But anyway, I ended up having a shot. I shot a mule deer doe, and I was completely calm at this. I mean, I was just filling a tag for meat.
Sure. Yeah.
And like, I held the pin right on. It was a 35-yard, quartering away, calm shot, and the arrow kind of did a little bit of a corkscrew, but it hit to the right. It was back a little bit, and I was like, man, you know, what the hell? So I was like losing confidence in my equipment, and then that was just like a mental breakdown for me. And then 2 days later, had a nice 6x6 bull come in, and it happened like so fast. He was chasing a cow. I had ranged like through the opening, and he come running through and stopped perfect. I actually have it on Tacticam, and I just completely blew it. Just like pulled back, like you said, just hammered it.
Yeah, you went. So when you all that stuff, your bow going out of tune, all that stuff, all that did was change your thought process. Because, and don't take offense to anything that I'm telling you, but if your thought process was affected by that, then it was weak to start with. Right.
Yep.
Meaning it was not the problem. The whole problem with this situation is that you never blueprinted how you do it. Right.
Yep.
So you go to a tension activated release, and here's the problem with that is that's gonna fix your target panic instantly. But here's why. Because if you don't pull on the tension activated release, your bow won't go off, right? So it forces you to make the decision to do a movement that's going to cause your body impact. It forces you to make the decision, or you could say it makes the decision for you, right?
Right.
Now, the problem is that people get put into tension activated releases and they can never leave them because they don't know the science of making the decisions. It's the decisions that are the skill, right? So if you did the same set of decisions on your index finger trigger. You would start the whole shot with, I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what. Then you would draw your bow back. Then you would aim. Then you would wrap your finger deep on the trigger. Then you would say, here I go, as your critical second decision, right? So you say, here I go, and you've got this hook formed around the trigger, and then you start pulling your hand through the strap, right? That's using the same set of decisions for a way more accurate system, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So tension activated releases are not the most accurate release aid out there. Otherwise, every professional archer would be shooting them.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay? So it's not the most accurate, but it certainly is the easiest for somebody to control. But the problem is that you never blueprinted it, right? So only when you shoot a truly controlled shot and you know exactly how you did it, meaning you know what you were thinking, you know what you were saying, you know you could have stopped it, and you know what decisions you made, then and only then do you have a robust thought process, right? And then if something goes wrong with your bow, you just fix it, and you know it's nothing to do with you, right? It's just something that happened to your bow. You fix that problem, and then you plug that controlled shot right back into it, and you're right back in the game.
Right.
But if you have a thought process that you've never blueprinted, something that goes wrong with your bow completely destroys your system.
That was absolutely it.
Right?
Oh,
so it's this whole shot IQ thing is about getting this controlled shot and then understanding exactly how you do it so that you can do it in any environment, any critter, any tournament, doesn't matter. You're going to stay in it no matter what. And that's what takes this massive level of determination.
So determination is one thing. Like, I can want to kill a Boone and Crockett deer, and I can be determined, and I can do all of this stuff, just like I can want to be a bodybuilder. And if I decide that I'm going to be a bodybuilder, I can do push-ups, and I can, do weights, and I can do nutrition, and I can do all of this stuff. But the mental side of that is is completely different. I feel like going through the shot process, because I guess let's break down like the exercises or the nutrition, or how do you train your mind to not just decide to take off when that bull shows up screaming and snotting.
So your mind going into autopilot is the default. That's what it wants to do, right? So the conscious override of your central nervous system, so that you can stay in that trigger movement, that's where the skill is. That's where the determination comes from, right? Or that's what the determination needs to be put into. And it's put into this override in the form of decisions, right? Like, can you imagine that bull's coming and he's screaming his face off, right? And he turns broadside. And instead of you just drawing your bow back, when he turns broadside and you believe the shot is imminent, you make a decision. I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what. Because if you never make that decision, you never open the door to the shot control house. I don't know if you guys have been following me on Instagram, but I talked about an analogy the other day about the shot control house. So every time you shoot a shot, or you believe a shot is imminent, right? And we've all been there. Either it's in a tournament, or it's in that when that critter turns broadside, or whatever it may be. You go, oh man, this is happening, right? That is you standing on the porch of the shot control house. You want to get in the house, but you can't get in the house just by happenstance. The door is never going to just open for you. Nobody answers the door because nobody's home. Okay? Nobody's in there to open the door for you. You have to open the door yourself. And the only thing that can open that door is you making a conscious decision. I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what. And no matter what is an important statement, because it's a determined statement, right? When we say no matter what, no matter how we're using it in our language for the day, it is a determined statement, right? Nobody ever just says that for some willy-nilly, talking about unicorns and rainbows, right? It's something that has to be done, right? So I'm gonna shoot this shot with control no matter what. That opens the door to the shot control house. You step inside, right? The first room that you come to is the aiming room. Do not linger in that room. Just walk through it, right? You get your aim done, you put your pin where you want it, and you watch it to keep it, because that's the only control you have over it anyways, based on the science of visual proprioception. Stick your pin in the middle, let it dance. No matter which way it moves, its next movement is always back to the center if you allow it to. So we're walking through the aiming room, we get that done, and now we set our finger on the trigger. Let's say we're shooting an index finger trigger, right? So we wrap our finger deep on that trigger. What that does, as far as the house goes, is it closes the door to the aiming room, because now you're moving on. You've got more tasks to do, right? So you've set your finger on that trigger. You've just closed the door on the aiming room. And then you say, here I go. Here I go is a decision that is now said inside your shot process that makes you intensely present for the next task, which is to move the trigger slow enough you can stop it, right? But let's equate this to jumping off a cliff into water. So there you are, you got your little toesies hanging over the edge. If you're thinking in the future, like, I don't know if that water's deep enough, you will never jump at that point. If your mind is in the future, you will never do a movement that's going to cause your body impact. It's the same thing that happens when you're moving that trigger. You are doing a movement that's going to cause your body impact. So how do you get yourself to jump off the cliff? You have to make a decision. Like, whew, here I go, right? That is very common verbiage to get yourself to move and hurl your body off of a cliff, right? Or out of an airplane. So use that in your shot. So you've aimed already, you've wrapped your finger deep on the trigger, and now you say, here I go. What that does is it locks the door on the aiming room. You've closed the door, but you want to get back in there, right? Your mind wants you back in the aiming room because it wants to use the sight picture as the shot stimulus, right? But here I go solidifies that decision. It locks the door on the aiming room. Now you're just watching it through the window because you can't touch it anymore, right? And what here I go also does, more importantly, is it opens the door to the concentration room. But the concentration room is on fire. It's a fiery mess inside there that your mind does not want you to walk into that room. Everything is telling you, do not go in that room, because that room equals an explosion, right? That's why you have to truly concentrate and talk yourself into the room, right? Mm-hmm. So there you are, you're wrapped deep on the trigger, you've already aimed, you're watching it to keep it. You've opened the door of the concentration room, now you got to talk yourself into it. So here I go. Keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling. You're talking yourself through that movement. That makes you singular-minded, right? It's a conscious override because you've got thoughts that are coming in. God, when's this thing going to go off? Oh my God, it's a 7x7. You're going to be a hero. All these things are coming in, but you got to be talking louder than the stress that's coming in to bounce those thoughts off, right? You got to stay in the movement. It's your only job at that point is to get in that concentration room, right? So you're working, you're talking yourself through that movement, boom, the shot breaks, and then you think you're a hero, right? But you just stepped out the door. You just stepped out the door of the shot control house. You stepped out the back door. Now you got to walk around to the front, and there you are again, standing at the closed front door, right? So it takes another decision, same decision, to get into the aiming room again. That's why every single shot takes the same decisions. You see what I mean? And you got to be able to blueprint it, right? You got to know what you were thinking after you put your finger on the trigger and after you said, here I go. Your only thought at that point is your shot activation movement, whatever that is, for whatever type of release you're shooting. Okay. And then you got to know what you were saying. What words was I using to talk myself into the concentration room, right? Was it keep pulling, keep pulling, keep pulling? Was it pull? Was it go? Was it a hum? Doesn't matter what you used, you got to use something, right? And then third question, could I have stopped it? Was I so concentrated on the shot activation movement that I could have stopped it anywhere within it? Right? And if you can say yes to that you truly could have stopped it, you're moving it at a rate that you could have stopped it, that means you're in what's called a closed loop control system. To get into a closed loop control system for a movement that causes an explosion, you have to be determined enough to make a decision so that you're present, so that you can concentrate. So that third question, could I have stopped it, is very important. And then the fourth question of the blueprint, what decisions did I make to get myself in the process for this one shot? And that's where you're going to find the fail point. Most people fail to make the decisions, and that's why they don't control the shot, because they didn't even get in the house. You know what I mean? They're running around the front yard. They're not in the house, right? So you've stepped out the back door, you've walked around the front, and there's that damn front door again. You got to make a decision to open it until you get to the point where I am now in shot control, where you set an explosive charge on that front door and you blew that bastard to smithereens. So there is no front door for me anymore. I don't have to, when I get set up for a shot, I don't have to go, okay, I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what. I don't have to say that, because that's a fundamental truth by which I live, right? There is no front door for me. I just walk right in the house. You see what I mean?
Yep.
And that's where the determination comes from. Are you determined enough to make the required decisions every single time? And it takes a lot of work, but get to the point where you're setting explosives on that front door.
It's an interesting process, because like in that analogy, I'm thinking of like, and I've heard you speak on a couple of different things where you said, okay, I know I made a good shot here, and then you kind of did an analysis of it after the fact and said what's going to happen. And so on bad shots that I've taken, which there are more than great shots, there's like three different types of like reactions, one being a good shot. Like in the instances where I've made good shots, or when like I think 2018 I had like my best year ever, and my mindset was I missed a deer and then came right back and shot 2 in 3 days. And by that time it was like I got the miss under my belt, that I was like, okay, well, yep, there's that. But then the next 2 deer were like, these deer are gonna die. Like that was my make a good shot control process. That was me opening the door.
Right. Would you say this is a very important point? Would you say on those shots, this deer's gonna die? That's a decision that you made, but did you know that you were going to shoot a controlled shot before you ever pulled your bow back?
I would not use that verbiage, but knowing the way that I shoot and how I react in the other instances, is I said to myself, calm down and take your time, all of those things. I mean, I'm not using the same
those are all conscious decisions, though.
Correct.
And that's, again, those are the fail points. When you don't say that, you're in autopilot, but you're using those decisions to bring yourself back. And that is the skill in itself. right? And you got to get to the point where you understand what decisions you need to make, when specifically you need to make them, and then scientifically how to carry them out, right? Because everybody that is super successful in shooting critters and people and everything else, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to make those decisions. And when you ask very successful bow hunters, hey man, what are you thinking about? Or, what's going through your head? And they all say something to themselves during their shot. Across the board, it's 100%. They all say something to themselves during their shot. And when you analyze it even further, most of them say something after the aim is complete. And that's that critical second that I talk about. It's the 1 second in time after you believe the aim is complete. That's when most people punch the trigger, because that makes intuitive sense, does it not? My pin's on, shoot it. Right? But when your pin is on, it's not time to shoot. It's time to decide. That's where here I go comes in after the aim, right? After the aim is complete. Saying here I go brings you back from autopilot land, from wonderland, right? But you got to get to the point where you know you're going to shoot a controlled shot before you ever pull your bow back. And then and only then is the door gone, right?
So like for me, I bought the thumb trigger, then I went to the silverback, and then I went back to my thumb trigger and I shot it good, but then all of a sudden I would catch myself getting into that, all of a sudden I would hesitate and punch. Then I bought a hinge release. Now the hinge release I've shot the best, like, and until I dropped it and ended up like it stripped out one of the little set screws, and then it was like it's like inconsistent. Like I remember at Total Archery Challenge, I'm sitting there and my hand is like way back, like, and I never. My problem with my process is I'd never, say I'm going to make a controlled shot. I don't mentally say it or I think about it. But like when I'm shooting, like when we're shooting our leagues, and I always tell like Frank and them, my Uncle Frank and Chris and Ernie and Adam, I'm like, I just let the pin float. Like I don't worry about aiming.
Good.
And I have like a process. I always like do my stance, pick my bow up the same. I always, adjust my grip first and then go through but I don't talk to myself. I just think about, once I get the pin on the spot, then I just think about rotating that hand, but I don't talk to myself.
Right.
But then when I went out, I'm like, I didn't want to hunt with my hinge release, and I didn't want to hunt with the bat or the tension release. So I ended up going back to my thumb release for the hunt. And I'd been shooting it good, but then it's like all of a sudden I just like.
Now, when you say you're shooting it good, are you talking about results or are you talking about control?
So the results,
right? So and you said that you shot 2018 was your best year because you shot a bunch of critters or whatever. But
now that was Adam.
Yeah,
Adam.
Yeah, right. So Adam said that, but was that you were shooting good result wise or you're shooting good control wise? Because if you shoot good control wise, your results are going to be awesome.
Right.
But if you shoot for results, but you don't know how you did it, then you're destined to fail because you never blueprinted it, right?
Now, for me, with when I'm shooting my thumb trigger good, is when it's when my process is all good. Like I'm not punching it at all. I'm going through it and I'm pulling, and it's breaking, and and I'm thinking apparently the right thoughts. And then I can tell like when I'm in a funk and all of a sudden I start just smashing, it's like, I got to get out of my own head. It's like then I change up releases, but now talking to you, it's got to be more of the determination and talking to myself.
Well, it's just you don't have a map, a blueprint of these decisions that you're making.
Right.
So you've got these good days. You're like, man, this is awesome. I'm doing so good. And people get to the point where, oh, this is working so good, right? Remember, in shot control, nothing works for you because your default is always autopilot. Autopilot is only interested in efficiency, not accuracy. If it was up to your subconscious, you would never shoot your bow because it's an explosion, right? So nothing is ever going to work for you. You have to work for it. What I teach people is how to do the work, right? What decisions to make, when to make them, how to carry them out, all those things, right? So you had these good execution shots, but you never blueprinted them. So therefore, there's no way you can repeat it over and over. So now when you shoot that good shot, we'll blueprint it, and now you'll know exactly how you did it, and it's much more powerful that way.
Well, what I was going to say, like again through that analogy, is it seems like when you're frozen underneath the target there, your body is saying you're not. It's like you're trapped in the aiming house. Like it's not in a good spot, and I don't know what to do now. I'm
You're in the aiming room with the aiming monster, and he's kicking your ass.
Because I mean, I'm as much as I and John need to hear this. I always approach these podcasts for the listener, for the people that are listening, and so I want to go through, like I said, so that portion of like why that happens and how to overcome that, and then for me on animals, like those 2 deer that I killed and I said they have to die. And I mean, I was making conscious decisions because I could have shot them a whole bunch of times, but they were moving. They didn't know I was there. And I said, all right, just let them come. It's fine. And then when they stopped, I just laced them. But now with these turkeys and the deer I shot this year, it was like I drew back and it was like, the pin's there, bam. Like, and
you shot within the critical second.
Yeah. And
guaranteed.
And so can we break down how to overcome those types of things, or if you were to find yourself in those positions, or that describes you as an archer, like what is the thought process or the mental steps or whatever to first of all understand that that's happening or what's happening, and then
so let's talk about you want to talk about locked off target first?
Please.
So it's all integrated, and you're going to hear a lot of the same things, but if you draw back and you can't get your pin on the target, that means that your aim still means something to you, and your subconscious is using the sight picture as your shot stimulus. You being on the target, your pin being on the target equals an explosion. So it won't let you do that. And as long as your pin is not on the target, you're calm as a cucumber, right? Now, if you were to say, okay, I'm not shooting this shot, and you draw back, you'd be able to put your pin right on the spot and hold just steady as you can be. Why is that? It's because it's not going to explode. There's no explosion connected to the pin being on the target if you know you're not going to shoot, okay? So there's a core problem in shooting with the human mind. Your mind will not allow you to cause your body impact as a surprise. So it uses that sight picture as the shot stimulus. So what happens is, let's say your pin's locked low. And then your mind's like, okay, get ready, Adam, and now. And it will jump your pin to the target and punch the trigger all in the same motor program. They become linked, right? So you jumping to target and punching the trigger all becomes the same motor program. The problem is there's all kinds of other muscle contractions that get linked to the trigger punch as well, and that deviates your point of impact. So drive-by shooters never get very accurate, right? So how do we fix it? Well, number one, you got to break your shot into 2 completely different jobs. Job number 1, draw back and aim. Get it done. Watch it to keep it. It means nothing to you. Just get it done. You shouldn't know what direction your pin comes from. If it's 30 yards and you have a 30-yard pin, draw back and put your damn 30-yard pin on it and just enjoy the show. You don't have any control over it anymore. Just stick it on there and then move on in your shot. You have to close the door on the aiming room, right? And that is done by making decisions. So you draw back and aim, get it done, watch it to keep it. That's job number one. Once that is done, you wrap your finger on the trigger, okay? That closes the door on the aiming room. Then you make the decision, here I go. If you can't get your pin on the target, you'll never get to here I go, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you should never shoot that shot because you haven't even moved on yet. But as the instant that your aim means nothing to you, just get it done, then you'll be able to aim just like if you weren't going to shoot your bow. It's instantaneous. I always tell people ask me, how long does your program take? It takes as long as it takes you to make a decision. That can be one shot, right? But you have to approach it with this massive amount of determination. That's why before you ever draw your bow back, I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what. That includes getting your damn pin on the target, right? So you get your pin on there, then you put your finger on the trigger, then here I go. And that is the separator, right? Here I go does so many positive things for you in your shot, right? Here I go. That closes, that locks the door on the aiming room, that opens the door on the concentration room. It just separates the whole front half from the back half. Here I go. And it makes you intensely present for that job. So those people that are locked off target are blending the jobs in the shot. They have no separation point in there. If they did, they would never be locked off target because it just doesn't make any sense to do that. You can't even move on in your shot until you get it on there. So let's say that somebody's been locked off target for 30 years, right? But they love archery so much they're still at it, but they're still locked off target. I trained a professional archer the other day that I had a 40-minute conversation with her on the phone. She's never aimed in the middle, ever, right? And she's a professional archer that's done extremely well aiming in the blue ring on a Vegas fence, right?
I know. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've heard her talk about it.
Yeah. So now she's killing it, and she's aiming in the middle because I just got her to separate from it, right? That's all you got to do is put your pin on and move on. It can't mean anything to you. It's just something that you get done. But if you got an archer that's been locked off for 30 years, it's going to take a massive amount of determination. But simply ask yourself a question, right? Draw back and ask yourself the question, am I on? And if that's a no, then you've got to get on before you can even proceed. So you may have to let that shot down, right? But you better be working at it before you let it down. You can't just let it down and use not being on the target as a scapegoat. Get your damn pin on the target. So that's the question I ask people. They draw back and I go, are you on? And they go, oh, not yet. Are you on now? Oh, not yet. Well, get your damn pin on there. You know what I mean? So, and sometimes it takes a little bit of tough love to get them, okay, I'm on, right? And that's where, then now put your finger on the trigger. Okay, and you see their anxiety building. Now say it. Here I go. Okay, here I go. And then they start working. Like if they do it with if I had somebody that was locked off target and they're punching the trigger along with that, I'd have them go to a tension activated release, right? But I would set it so tight that it won't go off. And so then they put the safety in, they draw back and aim, they let the safety off, then they say, here I go, and they start pulling, right? But their mind sees that pin on the target. It's like, now! So it gives it a big old yank, but it doesn't go off, right? So then I have them push the safety in and let it down. Okay, what were you thinking about? Well, I was thinking about pulling, and then I saw that pin on there. So that they step back into the aiming room, right? and the aiming monster kicked their ass, and it made them yank the trigger, right? To do that big old yank, but it didn't go off. So we analyzed that. What were you thinking about? Well, I was thinking about my aim. I was thinking about, when's this thing going to go off? How much do I have to pull? You know, their mind gets stuck in questions. When is it going to go off? Why isn't it going off? Is it ever going to go off, right? So it gets stuck in those questions, and all of those things do not equate to concentration on the movement. So usually they'll do that for just a couple, maybe twice, where I get the big jerk in there, and then I have them let up, and then you see the determination go up. And everybody, you know, in my courses, I have a signature test that shows somebody closed loop control systems and open loop control systems, and how much determination it takes, and the exact speed you can move your release, and all these things, right? And when they finally decide to at least write their name correctly within the parameters, they all have a tell, right? They either sigh, they cuss, they scoot closer to the piece of paper, they grip the pen differently, but they all have a tell, right? Same thing when the archer finally breaks and goes, okay, I'm going to do this way no matter what. Then you see him draw back and aim, and then I go, are you on? Yep, I'm on. The aim happens very quickly, right? Okay, let the safety off. Safety comes off. Say it, here I go, and then they start pulling, and they're pulling, and they're pulling, and they're pulling, and they get to the point where their body's just shaking like crazy, but it still hasn't gone off. And then I have them push the safety and let it down. What were you thinking about on that one? Man, I was just thinking about pulling. That's the answer I'm looking for, right? Because they finally made themselves singular minded. They finally got enough determination to make a decision so that they were present, so that they could concentrate. And then and only then do I start to back that release off. And I only let it off a little bit at a time, where they got to pull like crazy, and all of a sudden, boom, the thing goes off. What were you thinking about? What were you saying? Could you have stopped it? What decisions did you make? Right? So now they're starting to formulate this blueprint, and then I quickly get them off the tension activator release and back into whatever release they want to shoot. Right? So we take that blueprint into whatever release it is. So that's how I fix these people. I don't always have to do it with a tension activator release, but I certainly don't have people get in that tension activator release and stay in it. Because if they stay in the tension activator release, they're not getting reps in making the decisions. And that's what you need reps in. You don't need reps in shooting. You need reps in making decision. You need reps in concentration. You see what I mean? It's a whole different approach.
Okay. And I'm imagining that it's going to be similar, but for guys like myself that have maybe more often than not, or found ourselves in this position where, by using your terminology, as soon as I get the bow back, I go, here we go, and then there it goes.
Right. Well, that's just, not knowing your blueprint, right? Mm-hmm. And also shooting the shot from Wonderland. Because if you pull your bow back and you don't know whether you're going to control the shot or not, you're not going to control it. You're going to go to the default, subconscious, autopilot, right? You got to get out of Wonderland. There can be no question as to how you're going to control your shot. And why wouldn't you control it if you know the blueprint?
Right.
Right? It gets to the point where it doesn't make sense to not control your shot. See what I mean?
Yeah, I have to imagine that there's a albeit mental, muscle memory learning curve there, because as you say, you will always fall back to autopilot if you let yourself.
Well, yeah, but I mean, all of your shot activation movement is consciously driven. So there is no muscle memory. I don't like to use that. It's motor programs, right? Because muscles don't have memory. They don't have little brains inside them, right? It's
correct.
It's motor programs. It's neural pathways and all those things. And, you can consciously send signals, right? You can consciously send the signal to your back to pull, or to stretch your hand, or to rotate your hinge, right? Those movements have to be consciously driven to be closed loop, which means slow enough you can stop it, slow enough that you can gain feedback within it. If it's too fast, it's open loop, and therefore you're going to punch it, right? Like when you punch a trigger, that motor program is so fast you can't gain feedback within it. You can't stop it once it's sent. So that's not where we want to be. And if you were to punch one, find the fail point, right? This is the big, kind of the pinnacle of this conversation we're having, is find the fail point. And to find the fail point, it's the same questions of the same blueprint. So let's say you punch one. Okay, what was I thinking? God, I was thinking about that is one hell of a buck, right? And you'll know that you were not thinking about your shot activation movement. What was I saying? I was saying, God dang, I think that thing's going to go 170, right? And you'll find that you're not saying the right things. You're not using your mantra to direct and trap your concentration. Could I have stopped it? Obviously not. A trigger punch you can't stop, right? And the big one is that fourth question when you're trying to find the fail point. What decisions did I make to get myself in the process for this one shot? Did I step up to the line and go, I'm going to shoot this shot with control no matter what? That's going to be your first fail point right there, because you probably never made that decision. Therefore, the door never opened to the shot control house. You never got inside, right? And then once you have aimed, and once you've put your finger on the trigger and preloaded that trigger, did you say, here I go? And that's going to be your second major fail point that you're going to find. So it's the same questions, whether it's a perfect shot or whether it's a horrible shot. It's the same questions. If it's that perfect shot, you're using the blueprint to really figure out exactly how you did it. If it's a horrible shot, you're using the blueprint to find the fail point. And then once you find the fail point, super easy to fix, right? Well, I got to make this decision at this point. I got to make this decision at this point. I'm going to say these things at this point, right? And you just become ultra conscious within that shot process. And all the bad stuff goes away. But it only goes away for that one shot. Then it gets reloaded in the chamber, right? The door's closed again. You see what I mean?
Yeah. It's like, damn it, I gotta go back to the front.
Right. You always have to start from the front porch. You can't go in the back door.
I think that's another big thing too, is like, for me, I'll like go through my process, and I do have a process. It's just like I said, I don't, and then I just start. It's like, I don't know if I get complacent or what, but I just get lazy, and then I just start, then I'm just out there, I guess, back into just like subconsciously just shooting, just getting shooting reps, and then it's like, oh, bad shot, then.
If you're just doing shooting reps, I guarantee you're practicing your own failure.
Yep.
And so this is one thing that, John and I talked about a little bit in preparation for this episode, but it's almost like your philosophy could be superimposed on like professional baseball players who fiddle around with their gloves and touch their helmet, and they do the same thing every time, and they just forget about that last swing, the last pitch, and they do all of those things to reset themselves in that exact moment.
Well, they're making themselves present, but here's the difference. In most other sports, and let's use baseball as an example. You've got a pitcher that twirls that ball inside the glove, maybe pinches their glove a few times, looks away, looks to second base, whatever they do, whatever their routine is, right? And they follow that routine, but the movement, their successful movement, is open loop. It's pitching, right? When you throw that baseball, there's no explosion that happens. So that movement is supposed to be fast enough that you can't stop it. You don't need to gain feedback within it, right? It is its own motor program. It's an automatic motor program, and it's supposed to be in baseball, and especially in pitching or throwing any baseball or football or whatever. but there's no explosion, right? If the pitcher knew that the baseball was going to explode 6 inches in front of their face, if they threw it perfectly, then their pitching movement would become an anticipated movement, and they'd never be able to throw it right because they'd have all kinds of other muscle contractions that would brace them for the recoil of that, right?
Right.
So now in pitching as well, what's most important? Most important is vision and all these things, not necessarily the motor program, but let's think about the game winner, right? Okay, if I pitch this one perfectly, it's going to be a no-hitter, right? I got to make sure that I break my wrist at this certain point. So what they did is they just put conscious thought inside an open loop movement, which kills the totality of the movement. And they throw it, it's nothing like what you saw on the thousands of other pitches that they threw that day, right? The free throw shooter, right? So he bounces the ball 3 times, then spins the basketball, and then shakes his ass a couple times, and then shoots it. Well, on the game winner, he thinks, oh, God, I got to do this one perfect. So he puts a little conscious thought into that open loop motor program of the shot itself, and it kills the totality of it, and they miss it every time, right? So that's where it's completely different than shooting, because in shooting, you have to put the conscious thought into the shot activation movement. It's closed loop, not open loop, right? In most sports, the successful movement is open loop, but that's not the way it is in shooting because there's this explosion attached to it. So if you go open loop, there will be pre-ignition movements linked to your trigger motor program. That's not my opinion. That's how it works. That's the science of it, right? So the conscious override and concentration on that movement, that's all the consciousness that keeps you so you're moving closed loop, slow enough you can stop it, even though you know the explosion's coming. That's why shooting is so difficult for the human mind to comprehend.
So, what happens when Joel Turner makes a bad shot?
So, well, I don't make any shots where I don't get through my trigger properly. I won't do that. I don't care who you are, who's watching, what's happening. Now, I'm not saying I hit the X all the time. And sometimes I'll have a collapse, right? It doesn't happen very often, but I've had it happen on critters before where I'm working through my trigger, and when the trigger breaks, there's a collapse that happens, right? And it usually has to do with I'm holding way too long, or my thought process is not in the right place, and I don't put it back where it needs to be. And that's happened when in the initial stages of shot control. Like, I didn't gain control of my shot until 2015. That's when I made the final vow, basically, that I'm never going to shoot an uncontrolled shot on a critter, and I won't do that. There is no way that I'm shooting an uncontrolled shot. Now, there's some motor programs that may come in. It doesn't happen very often, but I've ones where my thumb doesn't let go correctly, right? It just doesn't, because I shoot with my thumb on a stick bow, but it doesn't happen very often. But if it did, same questions of the blueprint. What was I thinking? Well, I was thinking the right thing. What was I saying? I was saying the right thing. Where was the breakdown? And the breakdown was maybe, if I have a shot, this happens to me in tournaments quite often, where I'm at full draw and I've got the perfect aim. I'm looking at that thing going, God, if it would go off right now, it would be so good, right? But then I got to snap myself back to reality and go, hey, dumbass, that's not what you need to be thinking. My trigger will never pop at that point, ever, right? Because I'm thinking about, oh, God, that looks so good, right? So I find myself every now and again in a tournament with that. If I have the time, I'll let that down. If I don't have the time, then I know how to fight. And if I need to fight, I need to speak with more aggression in my mantra. It's not keep pressing, or whatever, movement I'm doing for whatever trigger. It's keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing, right? I use more aggression in my speech, and that adds strength to the movement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can simply look at weightlifters on the last rep. They're not talking nicely to themselves, right? Right? They're
Right.
using aggression in their speech to enhance their concentration.
Yeah. Now, John, we're just about coming up on time here. I know you got to shoot. John always asks about your bow and stuff, but so this has been one of the podcasts that our listeners, our Patreons have been saying, hey, you got to talk to Joel Turner, but you have to ask him what is up with the backwards riser thumb release. Yeah. What in the world is going on with your bow setup? That particular bow.
I love it. I get bored, and I love archery so much. I study all the different cultures and disciplines, and so cool to see what's happening around the world, right? I mean, we, in our way of shooting, is not even the majority of the world, right? And as far as shooting with our fingers and with stick bows and stuff, I mean, there's a whole other culture out there of thumb shooters. And I saw it, I wanted to try it, and I shot it with a right-handed bow to start with, and understanding the science of my eyes not lined up with the arrow anymore. So I have to cant. If I shoot a right-handed bow, I have to cant the top limb significantly to get it underneath my eye. And when I do that, it brings my bow shoulder up just a little bit, and that I've had some injuries on that shoulder, and it doesn't feel that great. It's a very accurate system. My arrow flight is money. When I shoot with my thumb, I get 2.5 inches more draw length. Because if you guys see pictures or video of me walking, I walk like a gorilla. My arms don't go straight. It's not because I'm trying to be cool or a tough guy. My arms don't go straight. I was born bow-armed, basically, right? So I've never hit my arm ever, but it makes my draw length 27 inches. Right? So if I can shoot 27 inches or 29.5 inches of draw length, I'm taking the longer draw length, fellas, right? So, and when you turn your hand up with your thumb like that, it allows you to draw the bow much farther and get in better alignment, so I can hold the bow longer when I shoot my stick bow. But so now I'm watching all the other cultures that shoot with their thumb and their arrows on the other side. Well, I started to research that. That basically comes from mounted horseback archery, right? Where they were able to, while they're riding their horse, they're able to load the arrow on that side of the bow. And then the pressure from their index finger actually holds it against the bow. So the arrow's not flopping all over the place when they're riding their horse, right? But there's, so that got me to thinking, okay, well, maybe I need a left-handed riser. So I got myself a left-handed riser. And when I drew that back and looked down that arrow, the sight picture is phenomenal, right? So I get to see, it's like looking at a ramp from the side, because my eyeball is not at 12 o'clock over the arrow shaft. It's at 10 o'clock. So I get to see kind of down 10 o'clock on the arrow, which allows me to set the pitch of the arrow. Therefore, I don't necessarily need to judge range so much up to a certain point, because I'm looking at the arrow from the side, and because it's on the other side of the bow, all it is basically a bow that's cut so far past center that the arrow's on the other side of the bow, on the other side of the riser, essentially, right? So now I can look at it, my eyes at 10 o'clock, I can look down the side of the shaft to set the pitch, and because the arrow is so far over, I can still put it directly underneath the spot. So my left and right, phenomenal. My up and down, phenomenal. The sight picture, it's a double axis sight picture. I giggle when I'm at full draw on critters. And I wish that everybody could see what I'm seeing. Because if they could see what I'm seeing, you'd see a lot more thumb shooters out there, fellas, I guarantee you.
So how are you releasing that bow? That one of our listeners, he also had said that you shoot like a weird glove with like a metal thumb tab or something?
No, it's just a leather thumb tab. It's no different than a finger tab that you would shoot with your regular stick bow. but it's on the tab portion is on my thumb. So my thumb goes around the string, and then my index finger goes over my thumbnail. Okay. And that creates a lock or a latch, basically, right? So then you draw back, and then all you're doing is essentially just like you're flipping a coin, right?
Mhm.
That's how you let it go. You're essentially just flipping a coin.
I
And
think,
it's fantastic.
isn't that like I can't remember, but the Zen, the art of archery or something. Isn't that how they
Mhm.
shot in that book?
Oh yeah,
With
yeah,
the
because it's usually Kudo archery, Japanese archery
Mhm.
culture. So yeah, so they shoot with what's called a gaki, which is it's a thumb glove, but there's a piece of bone inside that glove that creates a ledge for the string to go on. And the string sits all the way back to the base of their thumb, whereas mine's on the joint.
Okay.
So that type of release of that type of glove would not be legal in competition
Okay.
because the weight of the string sits on that ledge,
Right.
whereas I'm holding full weight of the string on my thumb tab, basically. So, yeah.
All right. So what's your compound setup?
Well, I don't necessarily have a compound setup. I only shoot compounds for demo stuff,
Oh, okay.
and I let my son Bodie do all the compound work. But if I need to set a bow up for demo, I'll just take one of his and set up. Like my boy is a shooting machine, right? I mean, he's doing phenomenal. He's going pro next year, and he's just amazing. But he's amazing not because of any physical attributes. He's amazing because he has such shot control. I mean, he gets in these very high pressure shoot offs, and it's the highest pressure you can get in tournament archery, and he does well. He gets just as nervous as everybody else, but he knows exactly how to combat it. He knows what he needs to say to himself at specific moments in that shot. So the other day I set up one of his bows because we were shooting some indoor stuff, and I tell people all the time, there's no reason you should not shoot a 300 Vegas round. There's no reason why that should happen. With today's equipment, if you have shot control, there's no reason you shouldn't shoot a 300. So I set his bow up, I sighted it in, and I shot a 323X the first time I shot it.
Wow.
And that's not, I mean, shooting a 330X is some serious work, right? It took us a while to get to that, but I mean, just setting up a bow and shooting a 323X, and I'm not special. There's nothing special about me. It's just that I'm going to shoot that shot with control. I don't care who you are. I don't care who's watching. I'm running that trigger, whatever release it is. You can hand me any release on the market, and I'm going to shoot it with control, no matter what. Right? The front door of the house is blown off, fellas. So that's where I need people to get to, right? I need to have a table in front of you with 100 different releases, and you don't care which one you shoot. You'll run it with control because it's just a hunk of metal. It doesn't make decisions for you. You make the decisions. You find the determination, right?
Right.
So I guess real quick before we wrap up, only because we were talking about releases and bows and such, for guys that are starting out or struggling with target panic, and we live in a gear-driven world. So there's so much great marketing. There's podcasts that say, use this,
Sure.
use that. This is what we use.
Yep.
This is why we suck.
Mm-hmm.
Is there one maybe to stay away from, or something that you feel like allows people to have more control or allows for better success?
Yep. If you're going index finger triggers, go with a B3 Hawk Flex. And I say that because it's a single sear design that you can set massive spring tension on it. Everybody wants hair triggers, but I want you to be able to move enough that you can get to cruise control, right? I'm not trying to set cruise control at 1 mile an hour. I'm not feathering the gas. I want to be able to press on the gas and watch the speedometer come up till I get to 40. When I get to 40 miles an hour and I feel that right pressure increase, then my only job is to stay in that same speed. So hit the cruise control button, right? So that's why you want to set these triggers hard. And it doesn't. And the B3 Hawk Flex is one that you can make plenty short for almost any hand. And I don't make any money off of saying this. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I just have a lot of releases, and I do these demos daily, right? And that B3 Hawk Flex is one of the best ones. A Carter-like mic is another good one that you can set really hard with no travel. Those are the 2 index finger triggers that I would highly recommend. I wouldn't recommend any others. Well, there's some made by Trueball that are good, but you can't set them too tight. I want you to be able to set it super hard. And then for thumb triggers, just any of the ones you can set super hard, which there isn't really any that you can set really hard, but they all get to a certain level that should be able to run. As far as hinges go, make sure you're shooting a hinge with a click in it, because the only reason people take the click out is because it freaks them out, right? Well, that's because they're not using the click as a decision point, right? So how I would have people shoot a hinge is you draw back and aim. Once the aim is complete, then you make a conscious movement to the click. Doesn't have to be slow. It just has to be nice and smooth, right? So draw back and aim, then roll to the click, then say, here I go, to make your decision, to make you intensely present. And then you talk yourself through the rest of the movement. Closed loop. Before the click can be open loop. After the click, closed loop, slow enough you can stop it, right? So you want your hinge to have a long enough sear in it that you can get to cruise control. You don't want like a 6,000 sear in it where it's going to break as soon as you move just the slightest bit. That's where you're trying to set cruise control at 1 mile an hour. Get it to where you got some movement. Get a good, 14 to 20 thousandths of movement in there. So, and most of the hinges will do that. You just have to buy the right sears for them, right? And then tension activated stuff, the Silverback is good. I like the Stan Element. Those are all good, but again, I just use those for the initial getting people over the hump and understanding what the hell I'm talking about with the blueprint, right? And if I don't keep people in those releases.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well, awesome. This has been, I feel like this has been a really fun episode for us, and it's I think this is the first time that we've had someone on here to like kind of teach us about. We've had a lot of people to teach us about hunting, but never about shooting.
Which
right.
I think we should have this at the beginning. You want to teach people about how to shoot and then go hunt.
Yeah. It certainly helps. I mean, it just gets people out of Wonderland, and I hate watching people practice their own failure, right? Because it's gonna bite them in the ass at the moment of truth, and that's from experience. That's not just talking from the outside world. I mean, again, it took me 13 years to kill a bull elk with my bow, and now I used to dread getting a shot because I knew it wasn't going to be good. And now it's such powerful information to know exactly how you're going to control your shot no matter what. However many thousands of dollars you spend, it's very powerful to know how you're going to do it no matter what the situation is.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, this is it's been really good. So where can people find out about your course and follow along with everything that you're doing and all the things that you are doing?
So on Instagram, it's Joel Turner _Shot IQ. I've got a couple of Facebook pages. One's Joel Turner, one's Shot IQ. At shotiq.com is my website, and that's where you can find the online course in controlled process shooting. I've also got a precision pistol course on there, and which we go through all the science of controlled process shooting with handguns, which you can directly equate to rifles and such. And then so that's where to find me. I've also got a book on Amazon called Controlled Process Shooting. The thing is with the book, though, is I can't keep rewriting it. Where the online course, I can constantly, when I find new sciences and I vet them, and then I can put them into the online course. And then the next time you log into it, you've got all the new material. So it's very, very up to date, and it's the best that I can give you.
Well, awesome. Just, thank you so much for being on tonight and taking some time. Now go shoot another 300, right?
Well, I'm gonna go. It's a 3D league tonight, so I'm gonna go use some foam for some concentration practice, fellas.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, appreciate it.